what is the worst that can happen? The worst that can happen is like I get shot on national television.
And doing it with John Malkovich himself.
I look back and it's like our wedding videos are like really cringe, but I knew just the most important part was just getting started.
Ray's like, yes, yes, yes. And I'm like, how?
On that boat, I realized I needed to quit my job again.
He didn't think I was going to do it.
And she called my bluff.
You got the shot
Yeah,
and didn't get shot.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4.
He's no one, she's no one, we're no one.
All right, so welcome to the Co-Pro Podcast, where creativity and collaboration come together. We've got each episode bringing in people that are in brand, innovation, leadership, and storytelling. They'll share their entrepreneurial journeys, their thinking. We like to talk to athletes and creators. And today we've got Joyce and Ray Tsang, and they have a company called Only Today. It's based here in Portland, and they're just coming off an Emmy win. So I can't wait to learn more about that. But if you want to learn about and hear about, we're going to connect Mother Teresa, Communist China, modern day slavery, Barack Obama, and the Super Bowl all in this episode. So stay tuned. All right, Joyce and Ray, we've got this dynamic duo with you two, and I'm always impressed on how complementary you guys are as a team. Just straight out again, and when you're not there, I don't know how to say it. Like it's like Ray is always thinking we when he's talking about Only Today. It's never about just Ray. It's always including you, and so you don't get to see it. I want to give Ray a little one up and maybe get him a get out of trouble card once in a while. But he really cognitively thinks about we. It's really refreshing, especially in this generation. And me, not for Ray. It's we. And so that didn't sound very good. We'll go with it. I got another job. And again, it leads into, we'll start with like Only Today, right? And let you guys kind of tell me the story of like, why Only Today? What do you guys do? Just set the stage, like 101. What do you guys do?
Yeah, for sure. You want me to go back to when we jumped into production?
You can start here.
Oh, yeah.
And we're looking at a picture of Mother Teresa.
Yeah. So about 10 years ago, when we're spinning up our production company, the one we're operating today, there are a lot of reasons why we're putting that together, but I wanted to make sure our mission and purpose of why we're starting this company was forefront in everything we do, and a reminder of why the heck we're in this business. And I'm going to butcher this, but Mother Teresa, actually, why don't you just hold it up so I don't butcher it?
Why don't you just read it? Why don't you just read it? Because it's like...
Mother Teresa has a quote.
Yes.
She goes, "Yesterday is gone. Tomorrow has not yet come. We only have today. Let us begin." And that really resonated with me because I knew in the work that we wanted to do, I wanted to have an impact and have in the world a positive impact in the world, and I didn't want to wait until we had like a ton of money, we had a big brand, we had influence to make an impact. And that could be 10, 20 years, it could be 30 years out, and I wanted to make sure we remembered, and the team that we brought on, to realize that every work we put out, every relationship we build starting from as a little startup could have an impact, and the stories we tell could have an impact today. And that's played out, and it's really just, that was our North Star of like how we wanted to approach our company as a business, as a creative production company.
And how long you guys been in business?
So Only Today has been around this is our 10-year anniversary.
Congrats.
Thank you. But Joyce and I have been in film production for 15 years.
All right.
Yeah.
But that brings up the other interesting thing, and it's a point of like, how did this happen? And again, you came out of a finance background. You were a mechanical engineer, actually have some patents.
Yeah.
And it's like, and then all of a sudden you're in this creative industry. And so there was I love pivot points, and there's a pivot somewhere in there. It's like, Tell me more about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think for myself at least, I still see like what I did before this life as creative. I mean, I was an engineer, but I was an engineer in R&D, so I was being creative in just a different way. It was like coming up with new products and designing things. I mean, I was doing 3D printing when 3D printing machines were like the size of this room. Like it was just this massive, giant. It's like the size of like I think they were at the time our machine that we were using in the lab was like the size of a minivan. I mean, that's probably shows how old I am now. But like that, I just felt like I was still doing something. I've always been doing something creative. It was just in that sense I was in the engineering world. But I think for me, like the pivot was just not. It was not the science or the engineering that I didn't like. It just got stuck in kind of like a corporate rut that I was like not digging. And you know, I would go home and I would kind of vent and talk about work. And at some point, I think Ray was like, well, why do you don't have to do this forever, you know? And as somebody who came from, like a family of not entrepreneurs, which is different, like Ray came from a family of entrepreneurs, like my brain just like couldn't wrap around the fact that like, oh, I could like do my own thing.
I could be my own boss.
I know. And this guy kind of just like dared me.
Yeah.
He was like, well, I don't know, like I don't really want to, let's do something else. And I was like, I don't know, maybe it feels a little scary. It was like 2008. So it was like not a great time economically to be like, let me go quit my job with health insurance and
Joyce was working at 3M. She had a pension,
and a
health
401k,
insurance, 401k.
and
Pension?
yeah.
What's that?
I know, right? That doesn't even exist anymore. And like, and go be an artist. But he, Ray kind of dared me. He's like, well, if you're not going to do it, i.e. quit, he's like, well, I'm going to do it. And I kind of had this moment where I was like, oh crap. Like if he quits first, well, one of us should probably do the responsible thing of like keeping our day job.
Yeah, this is where it's messed up.
Just in case. And
I was
like,
going to quit.
Yeah, and I was like, well, if he does it first and this doesn't work out, I'll never get my chance. So I kind of like quickly wrapped up my project at work. I like delivered the thing. We launched our I was running a project at the time, a new product. We like finished it. We launched it. Like on the day that we launched it, I went to my manager's office. I was like, thanks, it's been fun, but bye.
I'm out of here.
Yeah. Yeah. Man, yeah. So I wasn't. Just going back a little bit. So my background's in finance. I was working for a little private equity shop in LA, and just in my 3 or 4 years of being in that finance industry, I realized that people are also very creative. Wall Street's very creative on how they want to squeeze every percentage point of return from any project, any investment.
Creative, huh?
Very creative, but with a different purpose. And I realized that I love finance, but I hate that our only sole focus in private equity was how much a return we can make for ourselves. And I wanted to channel that creativity to actually do something good in the world, tell stories, like give a voice to people who don't have the opportunity and the resources to share their own story and be that conduit for those stories. And so this was, and then, so on our honeymoon in 2009, I knew I was going to quit. We had just gotten married, we were in Hawaii, and I told Joyce, I'm going to quit. And I know you hate your job. I didn't hate my job, I just didn't love the industry. And I dared Joyce, like, I'll quit, but if you want to quit first, go for it.
He didn't think I was going to do it.
And she called my bluff. and as soon as we got back, she launched this huge project for 3M that she also got patents for it, was going to get promoted, and she walked in and she put in her 2 weeks notice right before I did. And so I still hung around my job for like another half year or whatever. And then I followed along afterwards. Yeah.
I think that's baller.
Yeah.
I don't know if I would do it the same way, knowing what I know now, but that's what we did.
Yeah.
It was kind of like the mentality was, here's where I think, like looking back on it now, I was just like, well, what's the worst thing that can happen?
Yeah.
Like, the worst thing that can happen is it doesn't work out, and I go back to finding another job being an engineer.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I still have my degree. I still have, whatever, the few years experience that I had at the time.
That's
But
huge.
the flip side is, like, if I didn't try, I don't know, 20, 30 years later, I might really be kicking myself and not know if that would have ever been an option.
And there's plenty of time to recover.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You're still young. You got the rest of your life to kind of figure it out and make up for
Yeah.
it. But again, what I'm hearing is it's like, what do I have to lose?
Yeah.
That's a big thing. And again, I'm sure we all know folks that are just sort of like, oh, I got to stay on my job, and they're afraid is ultimately what it is to make that change, that be brave and just go for it. Because if one door closes, another one opens, you'll be fine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we'll be great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But speaking of, doors that aren't good and have to close, Ray, there's a story about how your DNA ended up in L.A.
How my dad?
Yeah, how your family
Oh,
got
how my
over
family,
here.
yeah.
So you're second
Yeah.
generation.
Yep, I'm a second generation. So my mom was a refugee from Vietnam in the 70s, and my dad was a refugee immigrant from China, also in the 70s, and they both, it wasn't like an easy immigration process. They basically had to flee the communist government. No, they were forced to, because the government at the time was coming in and seizing all their land, their family land, businesses, all their assets. And so, I know with my mom's journey, and not just my family, but there's a whole generation of immigrants who had to get on little 8-person fishing boats, pile 40 people in the middle of the night, and just take off into the ocean, in the hopes that sponsors or a large container ship would stop and save them. So that was their journey. And so a lot of people died during that. I think it was a 5-year window where the U.S. government had opened up the country to all these refugees. And so my mom came with her family at the time, and my dad, who was living in China, wasn't as easy, couldn't hop on a boat. So one night, him and a buddy of his basically had to leave their families, and they swam from China to Hong Kong. I think it was an overnight swim. And from there, they were able to immigrate and make their way to California. And that's in Southern California is where my mom and my dad met.
So really, they had a little harder decision making.
Yeah, yeah.
Do I quit my job, or do I stay here and maybe I die on this boat?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
How brave, and
Yeah.
What a crazy story.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, these stories are still happening today.
Yep.
Right, and they keep coming. Again, you got the decision to go out on your own. Started to think about, was it directly, hey, I want to be a DP, a director of photography, or what was?
Yeah, no, that's
Where's the fork?
No,
there?
that's a great question.
Where's the vision?
I'll start, but you can fill in the
Sure,
gaps.
sure.
But we had it wasn't a plan that we were able to draw out. I just knew I wanted to tell stories. Because I've been, at the time, there were so many great movies and TV shows and documentaries out, and we both realized that someone was getting paid to be a filmmaker. Well, I was like, I want to be creative and get paid to travel, to shoot. I want to travel, but I'm in my 20s, so I have no money, so maybe someone will pay for my travel. And so I was just there is this idea of I can make a living doing filmmaking, but we have no training in shooting or directing or storytelling or anything. But I knew just the most important part was just getting started. And we just started buying gear, offering to shoot our friends' weddings, and we just knew we needed to put in our 10,000 hours, maybe a decade of learning and self-learning and training to really understand what it meant to be a filmmaker. And so that was all we expected from ourselves. It wasn't to make money. It was just how do I learn how to use a camera, and how do I build the skill set.
This is where our relationship starts to show. Like Ray is, and you know, this is good. I'm not saying it's bad, but like this is where we differ.
Mm-hmm.
He's the vision. Here's what I want to
Dreamer.
do guy, and here's me over here with my engineering detail brain going like, who, what, when, where, how, which is still how we operate today. But I think for me at the time, I was just like, I just got to figure out how we're gonna do this. Like, where are we gonna learn about this stuff? Like, how are we gonna pay the bills? We just quit our jobs.
Mm-hmm.
Still got to pay rent. Still got to put food on the table. So yeah, I mean, I don't even like lost track of the question, but it's funny. Like now that I hear you talking about kind of the early days, I was like, oh, it was still the same back then.
Yeah.
Like Ray has a vision of somewhere, you know, that I'm buying into because I also want to go there. And then because I'm just like, okay, well, like if we want to do that, like how do we get there?
Well, you must not have got the book about how hard it is to make a living in creative, even in LA.
Yeah.
Like you missed something there, because otherwise
not
you would have
get
seen
that
that it
memo.
was really hard to make a living, but awesome
Sometimes
for the
it's
world.
great to be ignorant.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it was hard. Now that I think back about it, it's actually really hard learning to be teaching yourself to be a filmmaker 15 years ago, because nowadays you can learn everything on YouTube and online, but back then it was like so hard. And because it was just during the switch from like tape to digital as well. And so
Yeah,
it's not
so
like there was workflows built out or anything.
Yeah.
We just had to like take all our savings,
Yeah.
buy equipment that very few people have used, and just learn how
I
to
know.
shoot and edit on our own.
Yeah, and we started at the tail end of tape.
Mm-hmm.
So like mini DV,
Yeah.
and then like started like right before, and then like jumped to the
The 5D.
with the 5D Mark II, like the first kind of like small format digital, and then trying to figure out how do you shoot and edit. Like I think
Manual focus.
all manual focus.
Yeah.
I just remember like back in the day, like I mean those rigs were big with the tape. I mean it was like a video camera, and then we had like a converter box thing.
I don't remember what it's called anymore.
It
Yeah.
was that thing, that Brevis adapter or whatever and then just so we can use the photo lenses for that shallow depth of
Oh,
field
that's right.
before you could just put it on a DSLR
Yeah.
and shoot video. So the thing was like this big. It's just funny. I mean, now cameras are kind of like going back to that size, but like, you know, trying to figure out how to do that with whatever, you know, a fraction of the YouTube content that's out there. It's kind of like where we're starting to figure it out.
But that's the good stuff, and you kind of hinted at shooting friends' weddings, and you
Yeah.
got proficient at it. And I'll share a story. Again, I've done some workshops with other kids, and again, the one analogy that I use, and I don't want to offend anybody here, but again, it's like if if you're going to shoot a wedding, do it for your friend to do a favor. But the second you start shooting weddings, you are now a wedding photographer, and
Yeah.
you're not going to be able to grow to be an MTV VJ or whatever you want to be, because everybody's going to see you as a wedding photographer. And you somehow broke out of that mold and proved me wrong. Congratulations. I'm so happy that I was wrong, but I don't know how you did that. Like, I'm still to this day curious as to how do you go from, I don't know the exact timeline, but you're shooting weddings, and then 2.5 years later, you're on the NFL. Like, that doesn't happen in everyday life. People move from wherever to LA to get famous. They're working at restaurants their whole rest of their life.
Yeah.
Tell the world, what's the secret ingredient here?
You want to tell that story?
No, you tell a story.
So I think even while we were filming weddings, we didn't want to just follow the same formula and do what everyone else was doing. Our goal was to teach, and so we would take risks, and sometimes we'd do horrible jobs, sometimes we do a great job, but what we were doing was just not what was expected. And so that's from shooting style, how we light, how we work with. So even though you have a bride and groom, there's still a client, and so that was just our playground to like how to learn how to deal with clients. I think we had a really good style, and and not to do our own horn, I look back and just like our wedding videos are like really cringe, but we started off doing free weddings, and then Joyce was like, we need to start charging, otherwise how are we going to pay rent, right? And I'm like, okay, fine. I didn't care about the money. I was just like, how fast can I learn? How many events can we shoot? But then we went from free weddings, and then a year later, we were charging, starting our wedding packages from like 10 grand a shoot. Because people just like really value the creativity and our approach. And then we weren't just shooting a wedding video, we wanted to tell a story. And really, people really resonated and appreciated that. And so they're willing to pay for that. And so one day, we get a call from someone who was, I believe she was trying to hire a wedding, like a film team for her sister's wedding, I believe. And she found our work, and she called, and she happened to be a producer at the NFL. And at the same time, the NFL at the time was also trying to break out of what sports, television looked like, and they were trying to experiment, and they saw a lot of the work that we were doing was just like really putting ourselves out there and trying new things. And she asked us, Courtney, we still keep in contact maybe once a year, and she goes, would you be interested in shooting a playoff game? I think it was Chargers versus Packers or something in San Diego. There's a game in Southern California, and see what you can do for the NFL. And so no discussion about budget or anything. We're like, yes, I'll drive. Like, I'm pretty sure. And so this was with like another production company that we were working for or with at the time. And I just said, yes, let's do it. Like, they don't have to pay me. Like this. And we just drove down to San Diego, shot a playoff game, shot some tailgating party and stuff. And that almost overnight just kind of launched us from like weddings into the sports world. And obviously the NFL loved it, and we had a lot of opportunities to like work with the NFL and a lot of commercial brands at the time.
It's funny that like you bring up like starting in weddings and like the stigma that comes with that as a creative. It's one of those things where I'm like, yeah, do we talk about that? Do we not talk about that? But like at the end of the day, I think I learned a ton doing that.
Yeah.
That is still applicable today, because in the wedding world, you do everything. You produce, you shoot, you direct, you edit, you do sound, you're doing it all.
Right.
So coming out of that, you have at least, totally different level, but like you have a baseline knowledge of like when you're working, like now when I'm working on a bigger set with dedicated departments and people, it's like you have a general understanding of like, what does this person need to do their job well? You're a problem solver, you're a project manager, you do sales. Like, it's all of the things that we do today, just on a different scale. And I feel like, I get why, if you think back to like the old like wedding videos, like, I get why there's a stigma, but also like there's so much that I learned doing that carries through to projects that we work on today.
Yeah, and I would say, just tying it, 'cause I know you've done a lot of like sports photography, live event photography, and it's kind of like that. It's like that's how we like cut our teeth. Of like, there's a lot of unpredictable moments, and like how fast can you move and how smart can you be to get ahead of that so you're ready when the moment happens. Because by the time you see it, it's too late. You have to just be there, and that's the training. Unintentional or not, I don't know. That's what has allowed us to really see, I think, video production from a whole different perspective, and not just like one department, but as a whole. And when we need to move fast, we can move fast, and when we need to slow things down, we learned that later in life. It's like, okay, a bigger production, we need to slow things down a little bit, but that's easier than just picking up a camera and go and catching the one moment that the client's looking for.
So what I hear, if I could recap and then fix my point of view, thank you for enlightening me. And again, for anybody that's listening as well, it's like, hey, it sounds like you guys went into this, we'll call it static industry, weddings, you had a disruptive idea. You really went through it and put yourselves out there and came out with something new and original, also using it as a training ground for future jobs, and you're still using some of those basic practices today at a large scale. And the other thing I'm hearing too is yes. Like, always say yes.
Yeah.
And it's funny because like it goes back to like, I laugh because Ray's like, yes, and I'm like,
No.
How?
Yeah.
And sometimes I think it comes off, I can sound like I'm saying no, but it's really just like, well, no, let's just pause and like figure it out. But I think, yeah, it is like from day one operating as start with yes. How do we, let's go like I forget, what is it? Like, is it stand-up comedy or one of those other awesome professions where it's like, yes, and.
Yep.
So start with yes
And
as the mentality, and then we can figure out the rest of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it served us well.
Yeah.
I think it's helped us in a lot of hard times when, you know, clients or whoever would come to us with a big problem or a big project, and it can come off like really kind of intimidating.
Yeah.
And I think like this dynamic that we have has been really helpful, and Ray kind of always going with like, all right, let's start with yes and figure it out, and then like, you know, then we work with the team and we're
Yeah.
like, okay, how are we actually gonna do this?
so now you're starting to shoot, let's call it professionally. And then, you know, when I first met you, Ray, there was this, you had this one picture, and if for the folks go to the YouTube podcast to see the picture, but again, it's you with a DSLR road microphone in a canoe. It looks like in a third world country.
Mm-hmm.
And then I saw this other picture, and again, it's like it's you with a camera over your shoulder, and you've got a young boy, and it looks like a soccer jersey or
Mhm.
something, and walking through a village in Africa or something, right? And
Yep.
so there's more to the story here.
Yeah. Matt, okay, so that led to the pivot to starting like Only Today. But before we started Only Today 10 years ago, Joyce and I had an opportunity to work with another production company, and that were really aligned with like what we want to do with telling stories and just like experimenting and trying new things. And we had an opportunity to tell a story about child slavery. And so it's like a heavy topic, but the reality is most of child slavery and slavery around the world has been eradicated, but still exists. They peg it as 1% of what it used to be. But we had an opportunity to tell the story, and one day, it was like a year-long documentary that we're filming, and then one day, I found myself in near Lake Volta, which is in just the outskirts of Ghana, Africa. And I was in what I guess you could call like a slave village. It was known for all this town would con families from smaller villages to basically convince them to give up their children, and they would work, make some money, get an education. That was the promise to the families. But in reality, these kids would then be put on fishing boats to help fish out of the lake. And it's because like they're small and their hands were small, they were able to like go under boats, grab nets that get caught under the boat while fishing and stuff like that. So obviously like a really sad and like unfortunate situation. And somehow we had an amazing fixer that convinced a slave owner to allow me to get on the boat. And on one side of me were the 8 and 10-year-old siblings. On the other side was their slave master, and they were just fishing. And so on that boat, I realized it kind of reminded me again why I got into this industry. And I knew if I want to keep telling these type of stories, I really need to have the opportunity to like make those decisions and make it happen. And so on that boat, I realized I needed to quit my job again because they weren't moving, because that company wasn't moving fast enough. I needed to quit my job and like start a company that to do exactly what I was doing on that boat. And then the other photo was it was actually so Ebenezer, I think he was 8 at the time, or 10, and he was a former child slave that this nonprofit we were working with were able to like extract him out of the village that he was enslaved for twice, because his family got conned again at some point to like, so this was like his second time getting pulled out of that horrible situation. And so we were walking to do his interview, And as we're just trying to find a location to film his interview, he held my hand, and then his grandmother was, you don't see her in that photo, but then like right behind whoever took that photo, his grandmother was asking if I could just bring him back to the States, because she was certain that he would end up back being a child slave once we left Ghana. And that really solidified my decision to like come back. And then within that year, I quit my job and started Only Today.
Holy cow.
Yeah.
You just don't think in our isolated little vacuum of Portland that these kind of things actually happen in the real world, and they're happening today. Thank you for keeping us and reminding us that we got a lot more work to do than just worrying about some of the things that get on the news here.
Yeah.
Just saying.
Thank you for saying that. I know a lot of our conversation, news, top of mind is kind of revolves around what the media is telling us to think about, politics, immigration, and all that. But
gas prices.
Once you leave the U.S., you realize there's like a lot of problems in the world that are like really unfortunate, but the things we can actually do. Like I was in this slave village because a photographer dedicated her life to just like also telling these stories, and she's built all these relationships and connections that even put this subject matter in front of us. Yeah.
Whew. All right, I got to take it up a notch. Again, and bravery is part of the theme, but again, I think ignorance was another thing that we talked about. And right now what you see is there's a picture of Barack Obama at a football game. And it looks like you're right there. You're standing close by. So what's the story with this picture?
Man. So this was 2010 or 2011. Joyce and I, along with like a bunch of other filmmakers and producers, had an opportunity. Okay, actually, let me go back a little bit. So the NFL brought us on. We filmed a bunch of games, stories, and stuff for the NFL Network. And in part of that process, this creative director at CBS Sports and Showtime, I think they own each other or something like that. Anyways, this creative director saw our work and also wanted to do something different with sports and documentary. And he had an opportunity to send a crew to film and follow the cadets and midshipmen in West Point and Annapolis military academies. So for a school year, we were able to just we were just flying back and forth from Annapolis and West Point to film the documentary of these kids, because they were like 18, 19 years old. And they were, studying academics, playing sports, competing in sports, but also training to serve in the military after they graduated. So it's a lot. Any one of those things would be a lot, but all three were on them. And so we were telling this journey of these kids, and it amounted to, I think it was like around November or Thanksgiving every year, the Army-Navy games, the big rivalry. They play against each other. And during halftime, the president at the time, so Obama, back in 2011, the president would cross from one side of the field to the other. And obviously because of that, they clear the field. Only like midshipmen, cadets, and the Secret Service were allowed on the field. Obviously, I'm like, well, I need to be there. And everyone was just like really disappointed knowing that we couldn't put a camera on the field. But I'm just standing there on the sidelines, and I realized that what is the worst that can happen? The worst that can happen is like I get shot on national television.
Okay.
Probably low probability as long as I don't make any sudden movements.
I have photos of snipers on the rim.
So I look,
It's probably good.
What's the worst that could happen?
It's probably good that I had no idea this was going through his head because I was in a different part of the stadium at the time.
Yeah, but I look up and like there's like snipers on each side of the stadium.
It's pretty funny because like at the time I was on the sidelines with I think I was on the Navy side for that game, and I was kind of with like the producers and the folks from CBS, and everybody was just kind of like, not freaking out, but it was like, we're not getting the shot. We're like, nobody's gonna get a shot. Like, it's just like, oh, well, it's like, it is what it is, right? And then, sure enough, at one point, we all look up on the Jumbotron, and I'm like, and I see this guy out in the field where he's not supposed to be. And I'm like, oh, I think we're getting the shot. I think we are getting it, because, like, he's out there with his Steadicam, like, just tracking as Obama was walking from the Army side to the Navy side, or whatever, vice versa.
And somewhere
you got the shot, and didn't get shot.
Yeah.
Got the shot and didn't get shot.
Yeah.
Quote unquote.
But I knew that was just a moment where I knew I had to make a decision and make it quick. And I just thought about what the worst case scenario, and the high likelihood of that happening was pretty low, as long as I knew how to, if I wasn't, running towards the president or making any sudden movements. But there, on the internet somewhere, I think there's a broadcast shot that's wider, and you'll see the Secret Service speed walking, trying to catch up to me. And I was speed walking to stay in front of her for as long as possible. And by the time she caught up with me, I got my shot. So.
Well, I also don't think she was gonna tackle you on live television unless she had to. But you can clearly tell they were like very uncomfortable. Like, what is this? Because I mean,
it's their job, right?
We all had to submit all kinds of things ahead of time just to be within like a certain vicinity of the president. Like, they're like, if you're within X amount of feet, like, you guys, like, are you a U.S. citizen? Do you have any felonies? Like, all these things where it's just like, just to be nearby, there was like all these checks, and here's Ray just like, well, I'm just gonna get the shot, see what happens.
Yeah.
I love that story. Classic. And
Thank
now
you.
you're on the field, and one of the things I like talking about too, again, is collaboration. And so again, what's interesting, and there's two questions here. One is, again, you have a company only today, and there's remote working, and then there's really what remote working is as a production company, we've been staffing up with freelancers to get jobs done forever. It's just the way it's always worked, is what we call remote working today. And so what's your insights and opinions on that?
So that's a great question, and I think that really ties back to what I was talking about earlier about how we found success with our clients, not just the creative, but everything that happens behind the scenes and behind the camera. And we have, I think I did a count once, that we have probably at this point, it's probably up to 300 filmmakers, so like fixers, producers, shooters, just peppered around the world, not the country, the world. And now, like, we boldly tell our clients we can get into any corner of the world as fast as you need us to be. But all those relationships exist, and we know people will drop other clients' projects to work with us because of building those relationships and like treating people well and making sure that we don't sacrifice, our relationships just for a better creative or for the final product. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but I'm kind of starting.
Well, I think what I'm hearing, or how I'm interpreting that question about collaboration, to me, is about building trust.
Mm-hmm.
Like building trust with our clients, building trust with our team, building trust with our collaborators. Like every person that we touch along the way, we try and look at as an investment in a relationship, and that goes beyond the project at hand. And so I think for us, like, collaboration is very like a long-term goal and a thing that lives kind of like beyond whatever we're doing at the moment.
Right. So thank you for reminding me about that. So we internally, we remind ourselves, like, every time there's a new client, new project, that but I hope the team also realizes, I don't care about the money side. I know that if we do good work and we have the right clients, our clients will find a way to pay us fairly. But that means especially for new clients, profitability of a project is like my lowest priority. It's does everyone walk away from that project feeling good and wanting to do it again and again for another 20 years? That's my goal. So we've done a lot of projects. We just lost money on the first project because for various reasons, but on the back end, like when you work on your 20th or 30th project with the same client, we're more than made whole on the financial side. And also, like, collaboration is a two-way street too. Like, we're not just taking from clients money, creative, whatever. We have to make decisions as if we're partners with our clients. And so that's why I stepped onto the field. It wasn't because I liked the thrill of having a sniper pointed at me. It was because I knew our client felt this was important, and I was able to make a decision without having to without consulting them on the fly, that I knew this is what they wanted. Now, they probably loved the idea that I would take a bullet for them, but I knew that wasn't going to happen. Well, there's a small chance that would happen, but I was able to make those decisions. And so when everything is on the line, our clients know we'll think of them as our partners and not just, well, am I being paid to do this?
Wow. Good soundbite there. Branding. Again, brands that you're working with some amazing brands. Again, Meta today, Microsoft, Adobe, Apple, T-Mobile, CBS, ABC, Showtime. I mean, there's lots of big name brands that you guys are currently working with, and making content for those brands. I'm familiar with some of the meta work that you've done and the storytelling that goes along with that. How do you connect the dots there? Again, like, what makes a good brand, and then how is your storytelling being able to lift the brands that you're currently working for?
Yeah, I think, especially with, think about like brand work, like branded content, like it's that collaboration piece, right? Like talking to the client, figuring out like what's the product side of it, quite frankly, like, it's paid for by a brand, like, but then how do we connect that to a human being? Like, how do we humanize that piece of it? And I think that's where a lot of our kind of documentary background comes in. And, we're going into people's homes and businesses and finding ways to connect with them without a camera first, just to build rapport and get them to open up and be intimate about their story, and then leading with that, and then just kind of like tying in the brand however that fits. But I think there is an appetite for that kind of storytelling where it leads with the person and not with the product or the brand, which really is like, I love that. Not that we don't do, straight commercials and whatnot, and like that's also a part of what we do. But I think it's this kind of human-centered storytelling that I gravitate towards.
So human-centric storytelling that makes a brand resonate for the consumer at the end of the day.
Yeah.
I'll buy that for $1.
Yeah. I'd say if I dial it back a little bit, we've intentionally built our brand only today, where if you really just look us up, you probably, if you don't know us, you probably wouldn't hire us to film like a polished shoe commercial.
Or a wedding. You might hire us to do a wedding. I don't know. It's very intentional that our clients and internally as a team, we know what we are saying no to and what we are leaning into. And it's not to say we won't shoot a shoe commercial, but that isn't why we built Only Today. Like, we want to tell stories. Like, there are amazing creatives out there, agencies that can do like a super polished commercial. But where we thrive in is when there's unknown and we need to tell something that's really honest, that's true, that's authentic. And not only does it come across as all that, but the process of all that also is aligned. Because it's easy to just we go into a lot of people's homes to tell their stories, and it's easy just to bring in a huge crew, do the story, and then it's like leave and we're out. And I know just from seeing that happen
is it leaves like a really sour taste in people's mouths because you're just upheaving like their entire lives to film them. You get your product and you're out. And like I tell my team all the time that actually that final product, that interview, isn't as important as how that person feels as soon as we close the door and we leave. Like we want to walk away with friends and families and people that want us back into their homes. And we want the client to feel like they want us to do that again and again. And again, it's like looking out 10 years. And the only way to like do this for another 10, 20 years is to build relationships and people inviting you back into their very personal and private space. And that means we need to not only tell an authentic story, but also treat people like humans and not like a product. And I think huge brands like even like Nike and like a lot of other clients we work for, they're not a monolithic kind of like brand. They only do one thing. They also tell stories with other departments and other people within these huge organizations that also want to tell stories that matter. And it's just like and finding them. We can't serve every department at Microsoft, but there are a couple who are really aligned with how we do things, and we want to be their partners and collaborators.
Well, you've been rewarded for your storytelling. It's
Thank
a segue here. Oh, this thing's so heavy.
Oh my God.
I've got an Emmy Award in front of me for everybody on the YouTube podcast. You can come take a peek at it, but man, that thing's pretty big. And,
it's pretty sweet.
I think this one of many in your quiver of tricks is for the Just Win Baby spot. And Joyce, you had the opportunity to go on stage in front of a big audience and accept this award. Tell me a little bit more about this project.
Yeah. This project was with CBS Sports. So, I mean, this is a client that we've worked with for a long time now, from kind of the
Very beginning, almost.
where Ray decided to go across the field. same team of folks. They do great work, and this was they had the Super Bowl this year. So for those not into sports, they just rotate networks. So I think it's every 3 years the same network gets the broadcast rights. And so I was working with the creative team over at CBS, and they got to come up with all kinds of different content, right? Like there's, the game, but then there's all the auxiliary things that go with it. And the director had like a really awesome idea to do kind of a short narrative that was based off a true story. So there's a story around Al Davis, who owned the Raiders back in the day, and this year the Super Bowl was in Las Vegas, so there was like a little bit of a tie in there. And the spot was a short narrative about kind of his life and his career through the NFL. And it was an ambitious project, to say the least. We got a call for this about a month before or so, a month before the Super Bowl. And it was big because, it was for the Super Bowl, and also just like the sheer kind of scale of what it would take. But I don't know, we start with yes, right? Like you start with yes, not knowing a lot of factors. But yeah, it ended up being quite an undertaking. There's, a lot of people worked on this. I definitely not by any means taking credit for all of it. A lot of people worked on the spot at CBS, on our team, a bunch of other kind of creative folks. And it ended up, I don't remember if it won more than one. It was definitely nominated for more than one Emmy, but we ended up taking the Emmy for outstanding camera work, which was, the department that I was heading up for this one, which was really nice honor to have, knowing everything that we put into it.
The thing that I remember being so inspired by was the actual award ceremony. And I'm usually not the award ceremony all the same, but it was a big audience, and watching you as a solo woman get up across that stage and address the audience and give accolades to your team, and including accolades for this crazy guy here who tries to get shot to get the shot. And what were you thinking? What was going through your mind as you're kind of receiving this for your whole team?
That made me think back to that. It was overwhelming. I think this is not our first win, but it is. It was the first time that I went on stage to accept, and I think first I'd like thank you to Pete and the team at CBS for letting me go up there. I mean, usually I wasn't planning on it. First of all, it's truly, I know it sounds cheesy or cliche, but it's really just an honor to be nominated, because there's so much great stuff out there, and then to win is a whole other level. And I was just expecting kind of either the director or the other producers to go up and accept. And I just remember sitting there thinking cool, we won, yay. And I look over and I was kind of being motioned to go up on stage, and I just remember thinking, oh crap, I don't have anything prepared. I wasn't win or not, I wasn't expecting to give a speech. So it was kind of a really that walk up was there was a lot of things going on in my head, awesome, really excited that we won, but also hey, don't forget this person or this person, or there's just a lot of pressure in a sense to give credit to everybody who helped me and everybody else on the team get there, because it's in the vein of collaboration, we just talked about, none of this happens in a vacuum, right? There were so many challenges and so many things that had to happen in production, before production, and post, that had to for this to come together, and I did not want to be that person to forget somebody.
Well, congrats. It's pretty amazing. So where can people find you guys?
We're kind of active on Instagram. We're the worst with social media, but we try to share what we can on Instagram. It's our
Only Today TV.
Only Today TV. Or our website has shared some of the work, I think, some of the work that we're really proud of, onlytoday.tv.
Write that down.
Yeah.
Go check them out.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, I had one more question.
Yeah.
John Malkovich.
Oh,
I got to ask the question, right?
Okay.
Again, it's an older spot you guys done. But
Yeah.
Joyce, you had the pleasure of filming with him, and you always want to know, is a celebrity cool? Were they a jerk? What do they eat? I don't know. Tell me a story.
Wow, I kind of boil it down. That was a crazy shoot. Pretty fun. Crazy shoot. I think that was a 1 day in out. I think we had him for
Game of Honor? Was that this?
No, this was for what was
Super
it? It was
Bowl
a
again.
tease.
It's AFC,
no, it was the
NFC.
AFC Championship tease. Yeah, we had him for maybe 5 hours, 6 hours. It was a quick shoot, and there was a lot of ad lib.
Really?
He's an A-list household name, right? So there's definitely some nerves going into that. But he was great. I gotta say, John Malkovich, super professional, showed up, no entourage, no hoopla,
No green M&Ms.
no green M&Ms or all that stuff. Super professional, super collaborative. That spot, we just kept every take was a little different, which made it challenging, but it was also, I think, what made it so great was there's just so much back and forth between okay, for this next one, I'm going to say this and do this, and then we're going to float this way. So yeah, he was great to work with. I think he there wasn't, it just felt let's go in, we all knew what the goal was, let's be collaborative and work together. Even with somebody at his level, it was great to be able to see kind of what I know works and is true with being collaborative and being being able to work with somebody hand in hand on set and solve those problems, and doing it with John Malkovich himself was
Joyce is under playing it. She's actually worked a few times with John Malkovich, and I think it's because of our approach of not just going in, because when you only have 4 hours, 5 hours with a talent like him, it's easy to just like really blow through production, being high pressure. Everyone just is exhausted out of that. But he felt good working with Joyce and the rest of the team and the folks at CBS to then I think a few years later, he agreed to do another shoot in Rome. And
Oh yeah, that was funny.
they shared a cheese plate together, had dinner together and stuff. So like he's he's an amazing.
I try not to talk about that too
Yeah.
much, but it was cool.
Yeah,
It
but
was cool. He's a pretty, for who he is, like, he was down to have dinner with some of the crew, so there's that.
yeah,
Sorry, just curious. A super fan of what he's been able to produce and put out in the world, and it's always good to hear that. Yeah, he's a good dude. Like,
Yep.
he's not
He was.
a high maintenance kind of guy, and he'd probably say hello to you on the street. But, all right, I got my curiosity out of the way. I'll let these guys go back to the edit.
You might see him. I think he is in Portland from time to time.
Good.
Because I think his son went to Reed.
I know they're filming something down southeast. There's
So he's like on
big
the
rigs are
board
down
at
there. Maybe he's
Reed
here.
or something
Yeah.
like that. So,
Who knows?
anyways,
That's it. That's what I got. Thank you.
thank you for having us. That was
Yeah,
fun.
for
Thank
sure.
you guys.